I'm sure Lamphere didn't have any idea about what was going to happen in Mississippi or what was going to happen in Illinois or Indiana. All he knew was that one thing, and yet the fruit of that multiplies, and it's just amazing.
I think too, Sammy, we got to keep in mind that just as you said to introduce it, that the explosion of people coming to pray was directly tied to an economic collapse, and it was one of the darkest. And it was right just prior. It was this great outpouring. That 1857 prayer revival happened within the context of a financial collapse, and it was just a very few years, just months before the Civil War broke out in the United States. So when we think, and I know you've got more of a context for this than probably anybody I know alive, that when we're praying for revival, when we're praying for God to do a mighty work, we can't tell Him, to keep it nice, keep the that all dimensions of it are going to be easy to handle.
Yeah.
That there's a desperation often and chaos can accompany great outpouring.
Yeah. And and when you were saying that, I was thinking about when I traveled, especially in Eastern Europe, where we saw an incredible outpouring of God's Spirit. Part of that was tied to the times. I mean, there was a period of time, I'd say 1990 to 1995, where there was a harvest that was unexplainable. I mean, we didn't spend a lot of money for crusades then. I mean, it takes lots more money today for an evangelistic meeting than it did back then. You could stand on a street corner and hundreds of people would gather around and people would be converted. And I'm talking about genuine, long-term, long-lasting conversions were taking place. People that I know today, 15 years ago, and that setting came to Christ. So, not anything manipulated by man, but a deep work of the Spirit of God. God moved. But interestingly enough, in around 1995, you find that situation begins to change. And today, like I say, I go to Eastern Europe, and I'll be there this year in Eastern Europe preaching. But it's a whole different deal. You just don't show up and preach and God moves in a mighty way. There's a lot of hard work. There's a lot of prayer. There's a lot of organization that has to go into it. And it's just a different time and so we don't know the times and the seasons. We don't know that. And I think that's what Jesus was telling the disciples. It's not for you to know those times and seasons when that outpouring is going to take place, but it is for you to be faithful, to seek me. And one of the things that I find historically is that people pray. God puts it on the hearts of people to pray, and revival doesn't always come. However, when revival does come, it's always among those who are praying.
Right.
So it's kind of an interesting thing that we need to be faithful and praying, and we don't know if the seeds are going to show up in this generation at this time,
right,
or in generations to come.
But it isn't that the prayer is wasted. I'm convinced, and I know we share this, that when God puts a burden to pray, He intends to do something. God sets His people to pray it, and prior to anything He's going to do. But just like Abraham and Sarah, they died in faith. They saw Isaac born.
Yeah.
But they did not see with their natural eyes so many descendants that you couldn't count them. That they died in faith. And Hebrews 11 just keeps saying that these who were given specific promises, they were faithful all through their lives to believe God for something that they would not see with their natural eyes. That He would do it, but it might be for a generation yet unseen. And that's where that thing again, Sammy, of if you diligently seek me, you're going to be rewarded if you diligently seek me. But if I'm seeking Him just for something that I can see, then I may find myself disappointed at some points. But I won't be disappointed if I'm seeking Him. I can die leaving the fulfillment to the Lord, knowing that I've found Him. He's met with me.
Tex, let me ask you, there was a sweet, dear lady from Scotland by the name of Jessie McFarland who came here to San Antonio, And I remember we were in our little offices over on Loop 410, and we set up a meeting with Jesse and you and Shirley, and there were some ladies who had been in prayer meetings with you, both of you, and all came to that meeting. And Jesse shared a vision of what God had done in prayer with women in Scotland, and y'all started a women's citywide prayer thing, and that's been going for how long now?
12 years, I think it is now.
And would you describe, or would you say that you've seen a great revival as a result of that?
Not in the aspect as far as the 1857 or the Second Great Awakening, but at the same time,
What have you seen, and what does the 1857? How does that speak to you in what y'all have done in this prayer movement with women?
I think there's a couple things. One is that as we begin to call women to prayer, that we begin to cross the lines of denominational, of racial, of socioeconomical. And so we were able to come together as women to pray, which is what had happened in the 1857. People from all different backgrounds came together. That was one. If my people who are called by my name shall humble themselves, that is, we come together as one and humble ourselves together, and we seek His forgiveness and turn from our ways. We saw where there was repentance in different aspects of different areas of our lives as women. We humbled ourselves and said, we need each other, and we need to lock hands together in prayer, standing on God's Word, to believe Him for God to move, particularly in the San Antonio area, around the world, but particularly praying for the San Antonio area. And I think even David, some of the pastors, there's been some just evidence that God has moved in San Antonio as we as women have stood together and prayed for our leadership, for our husbands, for our pastoral leadership. And also that we haven't seen, quote, a great revival, but we've seen people that have in their own lives, some have come to salvation, some have been delivered from different strongholds or things in their lives. So it all started because Jesse McFarland from Scotland came here and shared a vision of how God had moved in Scotland and actually in Britain.
You know, it seems to me like what y'all have done has been...
I have to say this too, I'm sorry, but there are several women here in San Antonio area that Shirley and I and others that were on that core group, that they have prayed for literally 40, 50, 60 years for this area. And so I think we stand upon their shoulders too in prayer, part of it.